and welcome to the course on the basic fundamentals of an Individualized Education Program, also referred to as an IEP. Here is an overview on what will be discussed in this course to include what is an IEP, how one is requested, the process and timelines on an IEP, eligibility, what is in an IEP, the IEP meeting, and parent rights. An IEP can be broken down into three key aspects. First, it is a tool that is designed to support students with disabilities in achieving educational success within a structured environment. This environment typically falls within special education, even when a student is only getting consultation services or push-in services. Second, an IEP is a mandated legal program under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, that ensures individuals with disabilities are provided equitable opportunities to access the curriculum as their peers. Lastly, an IEP is a formal document that outlines specific educational goals and the services required to meet those goals based on the student's individual needs. Why is an IEP important? An IEP is important because it ensures that students with disabilities receive specialized instruction and supports tailored to their individual needs. This allows for educational equity and a free and appropriate public education. So how does a student or child get an IEP? How is it requested? An IEP can be requested by a parent or legal guardian that has educational rights, or school personnel to include teacher, administrator, and supporting personnel like a school psychologist or speech and language pathologist who suspect that a child may need specialized instruction or services. When making a request for an IEP, it is recommended that the parent or guardian make such a request in writing. Within the letter of request, the parent should ask that the school evaluate the student, include their full name, to determine whether they qualify for special education services under an IEP. Include your concerns and be specific, as this will help facilitate the process. For example, if your child is having difficulty reading and writing at grade level, then write that. So what happens after you make the request to have a student evaluated to determine whether they require an IEP or not? Once you have formally requested the IEP, the school then has 15 days to respond to this request. They will in most cases honor the request and move forward with evaluating the student. However, in some cases, they may make recommendations, such as trying interventions within the general education setting first. However, it is your right as a parent to request that the school proceed with testing. Just keep in mind that they may be ineligible if an insufficient amount of interventions have been applied and exclusionary factors such as poor attendance is present. On the next slide, you will see a visual depiction to better understand the IEP process. As mentioned in the previous slide, once a formal request has been made, the school has 15 days to respond. They generally do so by sending home an assessment plan or AP to be signed by the parent or guardian with educational rights. An AP is a document that outlines who will be assessed, the areas a student will be tested, and by whom. It also identifies the reason for the evaluation, who referred the student, and the school point of contact. Most importantly, it requires the initials and signature of the parent to give formal consent to proceed with the evaluation for an IEP. Once the parent or guardian has signed the document and returned it to the school then has 60 days to perform the evaluations and hold an IEP meeting to share their results and recommendations. However, before the meeting is held, the school will reach out and coordinate a day and time that works for the parent. This is done by sending a notice of meeting form to the parent 7 days prior for signing. A typical evaluation for an IEP includes a comprehensive evaluation of the student's academic performance, social skills, and developmental history. Information is gathered from multiple sources, such as the student's teacher and parent or guardian. By doing so, the evaluator is able to determine whether the academic or behavioral concerns are present in both settings. They are also able to gather potential medical and environmental factors that could potentially influence performance. Once the evaluator has gathered all the data required, they will then compare their findings to the eligibility criteria outlined for special education services under IDEA. This slide lists the various areas of eligibility in which a student can qualify. However, it is important to note that a medical diagnosis does not automatically mean a student qualifies for special education services under an IEP. Rather, the medical and school criteria for eligibility differ. Specifically, the school is looking to see how a medical disability is negatively affecting a student's educational performance, to include academic and social, emotional, and behavioral. For example, a student may have a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, ASD, but is performing at grade level in all academic areas. They also may be able to communicate verbally and non-verbally in an age-appropriate manner. However, they may have minimal social interaction. In this scenario, a student could be supported within the general education setting through a social skills group. Thus, an IEP is not warranted at this time despite a medical diagnosis. So what if my student is eligible for an IEP? What will it include? An IEP will include the student's current educational performance to include assessment results. It typically identifies why the student requires an IEP and in what areas. Thus, once a student is found eligible by the IEP team for special education services, the school professionals then create educational goals tailored to meet the needs of the student. They also identify what services and accommodations are required for the student to meet these goals and access the curriculum. Depending on the services and the needs of the student, educational placement will be determined. Specifically, the school is looking and quantifying how much time the student will be in the general education setting compared to a separate setting with special education supports. Now we are going to briefly touch on the area of goals within an IEP. This area is particularly important because it tracks the student's progress in moving towards grade or age-appropriate standards or skills over the course of a year, meaning goals are created to be achieved within 1 year. This is where we are anticipating the student will be by the next school year. To ensure that the student is moving towards achieving these goals, there are progress monitoring mechanisms in place through quarterly progress reports. In terms of goals themselves, they are created to meet the specific needs of the student. So if a student is shown through the evaluation process to require support to improve their math calculation skills, then an appropriate goal will be created to target that specific area. These goals are typically created by the special education teacher or supporting staff. When they draft these goals, they should follow the SMART framework, which ensures clear and concise. Once goals have been identified and created, the next progression of support an IEP covers is services. That is because needs drive goals, which then drive services. Depending on your student's specific needs, there are a plethora of services they may be eligible for. This slide lists several services in which a student may be supported. The most common support is Specialized Academic Instruction, or SAI, which refers to tailored teaching strategies and supports designed to help students with disabilities or specific learning needs access and succeed in the general education curriculum. It involves modifying the content, teaching methods, and delivery to meet the individual needs of the student. This can be broken down into 2 main categories, although there are other continuum of support, but the student can be supported in a separate setting, smaller group, or within the general education setting. In addition to services, students are typically provided accommodations to help them access the curriculum. Accommodations are changes or adjustments to how a student is taught or assessed. They are provided to remove barriers and level the playing field for the student. Examples of accommodations can be extra time on tests or assignments, preferential seating to include being seated near the teacher or board, use of assistive technology on assessments, and breaks. So when is all this information presented to the parent or guardian? This is the purpose of the IEP meeting, where the school and its staff present the results of their evaluations to include eligibility and their recommendations of the IEP or plan. Who attends these meetings? By law, the following stakeholders must attend the IEP meeting, and that is the parent or guardian, a special education teacher, typically the individual who assessed the student, a general education teacher, a school administrator, and related service providers or evaluators. The meeting will generally begin with participants introducing themselves, followed by ensuring that the parent has received their procedural safeguards, which outlines their rights as a parent. The school professionals will then present their evaluation results, their recommendation for eligibility, and then proceed with the IEP if the student qualified. This will include the areas we previously discussed, such as present levels of performance, goals, special factors, services, and educational setting. So what are the possible outcomes during an IEP meeting? Well, the most important outcome is whether the student meets or does not meet eligibility for special education services for an IEP. If the student does meet eligibility, this is where not only goals are agreed upon by the team, but also the type and amount of services and supports a student receives, and in what setting. Although there may be recommendations by specific stakeholders or professionals for these areas, it is ultimately a team decision, which includes the parent or guardian. Once the parent and team are in agreement with the IEP, it is generally implemented immediately so that the student receives the necessary support without delays. However, in some cases where there is a holiday break or the parent wants to talk to the student before a class change, a slight delay may occur. After a student is found eligible, there will be yearly, annual, and 3-year triennial meetings. The last and the most important area we are going to discuss is parent rights. It is imperative that a parent or legal guardian know their rights. As previously mentioned in this course, A parent has the right to request that their child be assessed for special education services under an IEP. Before any testing can occur for a student, the parent or guardian with educational rights must first sign an assessment plan providing consent. Without consent, the school cannot assess the student. Therefore, a parent can decline an evaluation if they deem necessary, although not recommended. Another right a parent has is that prior to the IEP meeting, they should be provided a notice of meeting 7 days before the proposed scheduled meeting. This ensures that the parent has been provided adequate time to make any necessary scheduling arrangements to be able to attend the meeting. If the parent cannot attend the proposed date, then other dates should be provided. To summarize what was discussed in this course, we talked about what an IEP is, how one can be requested, the typical process and timelines, eligibility, what is in an IEP, the IEP meeting, and parent rights. All of the information discussed is meant to serve as a basic understanding on how students with learning disabilities can be supported within the school setting. I hope you found this course helpful, but more importantly, I hope you have gained a better understanding on how to best support your child or student. If you liked this course, please share with others so that they can be empowered with this information as well. Thank you.